Have you ever seen this girl before, or heard the name Serno? How about this girl, Alice Margatroyd? Or the Shrine Maiden, Reimu? If you have, then you've met one of the many characters in the Touhou series. I have seen people mention Touhou many times over the years, but only recently did I decide to investigate into what it actually was. And what I found was not only cool, it was impressive. So this video series will be about introducing you to the Touhou universe. So the question is, what is Touhou? Touhou is short for Touhou Project, a series of indie scrolling shooters all created by one man, Junya Ota, aka Zun. He is the designer, programmer, artist, and composer for each of the Touhou games, releasing them under the group name Team Shanghai Alice. Zun was a 19-year-old student at the Tokyo Denki University when he released the first game. He was part of a school club at the time known as Amusement Makers, which was a group of computer science students helping each other out to develop or publish games and other creative works. Zun developed games for the NEC PC-98, which was a computer standard in Japan that had a huge market share at the time. By the way, if you're a fan of 80s computers and computer games, or really any sort of Japanese-style video game, I found a very interesting article about the PC-98 and other old Japanese home computers. It reveals the surprising origins of many classic game companies, such as Koei and Squaresoft, as well as explain the proliferation of the visual novel game genre. I highly recommend reading it. I'll include a link to the article in the video description. The first Touhou game was released in November 1996. Named Touhou Reiden, which means Wondrous Eastern Legend, highly responsive to prayers, it features gameplay elements from different genres mixed together in an interesting way. But keep in mind that it is very different from subsequent games, so don't be surprised when we change gears. Highly responsive to prayers, or prayers as I will refer to it, introduces us to Hakure Reimu, the lone shrine maiden living at the Hakure Shrine, a Shinto shrine situated in the fictional land of Gensokyo, which just so happens to sit near a gate connected to the netherworld. Generations ago, the gate was sealed, but the seal has weakened, and demons, ghosts, and other spirit beings have come through the gate and damaged the shrine. This ticks Reimu off, and she decides to give those monsters a piece of her mind. And that's it. There isn't much story to the first Touhou game. The backstory is presented only in the manual text file, and the endings have almost no text at all. The best way I can describe Prayers is that it is a physics action game. It is similar to games like Arkanoid because you have to use a bouncing object to remove certain blocks to continue to the next level. But Prayers is a much more difficult game, as touching the bouncing object yourself will result in death. You have to hit it with a wand, or with ofuda, the paper seals you often see in anime, and once it's built up some speed it can be a nightmare to juggle, especially during boss fights. There are boss fights each 5th stage, and they are very challenging because you have to hit the bosses with the yin-yang orb while avoiding their attacks, and their hitboxes are extremely small. In fact, the hit detection in this game is very much geared against you, which is why it's so frustrating. After the first boss, you are given a choice whether to proceed to Makai, the spirit world, or Jigoku, the hell world. In a bit of irony for us Westerners, the hell route is actually the easier of the two. In order to receive a good ending, you must beat the game without using any continues, and there is a different ending for each route. But try as I might, I simply cannot beat the Makai route without continuing. It's not a bad game, but its punishing difficulty makes it a game that doesn't suit casual play at all. While a certain level of difficulty seems to be a trademark of the Touhou series, this first game stands alone in terms of frustration levels. If you enjoy challenging games, I do recommend giving it a try, and here's a quick rundown of how the game plays. I do use a controller to play these games, and I use the freeware Joy 2 key program to do it. I highly recommend using a digital controller for playing any Touhou game, one with a good D-pad. These games require responsive, pixel-perfect movements, and an analog stick will only hurt you in the end. The X key makes Reimu wave her wand when she's stationary, or makes her slide when she's running. This will deflect the yin-yang orb and weak enemy bullets. However, you are frozen if you're not moving, and the wand only deflects bullets it actually touches, so you are very vulnerable in this state. The Z key throws your seals, and likewise this will deflect the orb and destroy bullets. Some boss attacks cannot be deflected at all, however, so keep that in mind. There are certain special moves that can be performed, but apart from looking cool, they really don't do much good. Bombs will save your butt many times, but because there are only 2 buttons, they're more than a simple key press away. You activate your bombs either by holding left and right while pressing Z, or if you're using a controller, press X and Z together twice. You are invulnerable while your bomb is exploding, and for a few moments after it's done, but you're also frozen in place for much of the duration. Bombs will flip and remove the floating cards in the normal stages, but they will only damage bosses if you have no lives remaining. Getting extra lives is paramount in this game, and you do that by collecting point icons, which drop randomly as the cards are removed during normal stages. At first they only give small point bonuses, but if you keep catching them without missing any, they will soon give you huge point bonuses, and these will give you extra lives. So I recommend not using bombs to clear normal stages, as many point icons will drop at once, and if you miss even one, the counter resets. The last thing I really want to say about Prayers is something I can say about all of the Touhou games, and that is that it has some great music. The PC-98 sound chips were really nice for their time, and it shows, as does Zun's composing skills. If you like FM synthesis, you'll find a lot to like in this series, even if the gameplay doesn't appeal to you. Each of these early Touhou games include a music test option in their main menu, so you can enjoy the songs without breaking a sweat. Despite being the second game in the series, as someone new to Touhou, you could easily consider it as the first Touhou game. It is the one that sets the gameplay standard for the franchise. Touhou Fumaroku, aka The Story of the Eastern Wonderland, or Wonderland as I will refer to it, was released in August of 1997 and once again stars Reimu. One day, she decides to go out into the mountains to train, but she is lazy and instead takes a nap. When she returns, she finds her shrine is overrun with ghosts and monsters. She has nothing better to do, so she decides to clean house, taking along her companion and servant Genji, a talking flying turtle. Unlike Prayers, Wonderland has story elements and text during gameplay. It also introduces the character Kirasami Marisa, who is simply a stage boss in this game, but ends up becoming tied with Reimu for the most Touhou game appearances. So she is as iconic to Touhou as Reimu is. In future games she is often a playable character, but in Wonderland she is the servant of Mima, the only enemy character carried over from the first game. The first boss you encounter in Wonderland is Rika, a human girl who is pretty handy with machines. She claims to have created all of the ghosts that have overrun the shrine. She built a tank that is the mini-boss for the first stage, and the flower tank, which is the first stage boss. This is the only game she appears in, and the only way to meet her again is to do something special. We'll get to that later. The second stage boss is Meira, a samurai who wants to steal the power of the Hakurei family. Reimu doesn't really understand what that power is herself, so she's confused as to what Meira's after. Meira exclaims, "I'm a woman too," so perhaps that refers to the power? The third stage boss is Marisa, a young human sorceress who fights you to protect her mistress Mima. Mima is some sort of spirit being, not necessarily a ghost or undead, it's not really clear, who hates humanity and wants to get revenge. To this end, she seeks to steal the yin-yang orbs from Reimu and use their powers for herself. What exactly are those powers? That depends on the ending you get. The Touhou project games are vertical scrolling shooters, but there are so many games in that genre. Luckily, the Japanese have a special term for this particular subset of scrolling shooters, Danmaku, aka Barrage. Danmaku shooters involve dozens to hundreds of bullets on screen at a time, often in patterns that players must memorize in order to survive. You might be more familiar with the term bullet hell. Quick reflexes and pixel-perfect movement are also necessities, especially on higher difficulty levels, as there is quite a bit of randomness in the game. It looks impossible, but there are some neat features that make the Touhou series not just fun to look at, but fun to play too. The first of which is power-ups. In Wonderland, the only playable character is Reimu, but she has 3 different forms you can choose from at the start of the game. The first is Speed. This form makes it easiest to collect power-up and bonus point icons, and your shots spread over the entire screen when fully powered up. However, the damage dealt by each shot is the weakest of the 3, which lengthens boss battles. Essentially, the Speed form makes the stages themselves quite easy, since you can take out most of the enemies from the bottom of the screen, but makes the boss battles challenging. The third form is Attack. This form deals the most damage per shot and will make quick work of bosses compared to the Speed form. The downside is that it is also the slowest moving form, and its attacks don't spread much, so getting through the stages can be tough. I have to say that fully powered, it does look pretty darn cool, and it penetrates through enemies. Attack form requires the most experience in order to play well, because you move too slowly to dodge surprises. The second form is Defense, and is the middle ground between Speed and Attack. Your attacks don't spread as much as Speed, but deal more damage, and you can move around moderately quickly. The name Defense is a little misleading. No matter which form you pick, you will die in one hit from any attack. The reason it is called Defense is because of its bomb attack. At full power, Defense form starts to shoot seeking bullets, which is extremely useful, although it didn't seem to work on Marisa for some reason. Along with your regular shots, which can be powered up by collecting P and S icons, each form has its own spiritual attack. They differ slightly, but they each deal damage and make Reimu invincible for a short time. The bomb for Defense form, however, lasts longer, and so she stays invincible longer than the other forms. Which form is best depends on your playstyle. In the manual text file, Marisa suggests using the Defense form if you're aiming to get a good ending, and I agree with her. Start with Defense mode, the middle option, and try the others after you've gotten some practice. Something that is typical for the Touhou series is that there are multiple endings, good and bad. The only way to achieve a good ending in Wonderland is to beat it without using any continues. It doesn't matter what the difficulty setting is. If you do use a continue, Mima will run away during the final battle, and you will receive one of the bad endings. You can only fight Mima's true form if you can beat her first form without having used any continues. Yes, the final boss has 2 forms, but don't worry. Her final form has much less HP than her first form. As long as you have a few bombs, you should be able to beat her. There are 3 good endings, one for each form Reimu has. Another Touhou tradition that begins with Wonderland is the Extra Stage, a stage that can be accessed by fulfilling certain requirements. In order to access the Extra Stage in Wonderland, you need to get all 3 of the good endings. In the Extra Stage, there are no difficulty selections, and you always start with 3 lives and 1 bomb per life. If you've only gotten good endings on Easy mode, as is true for me, the Extra Stage will seem like insanity. Rika, the first boss you encountered, reappears and attacks you with her new tank, the Evil Eye Sigma. I can't get far enough to encounter it, but based on the difficulty of the Extra Stage, I imagine it looks like this. The most significant suggestion I can give you for beating Wonderland is to not be stingy with your bombs. Your bombs reset to the amount you set in the options menu each time you die, so use them whenever you know you're in deep trouble. Extra lives are granted at certain point values, but no more are granted after 8 million points. Therefore, I actually recommend not collecting all of the purple point icons you see. You need the extra lives more in the later stages, so try to keep your points as low as possible for the first 3 stages. That's because in this game you are limited to having 5 lives remaining. If you earn any extra lives when you have 5, you earn a bomb instead. Wonderland is a great game. Zun really knew what he was doing when he made it. While it's not an easy game, much of the difficulty can be mitigated by learning the levels and enemy patterns. You will die very often when you're just starting out, but you will get farther along each time, and you will surprise yourself with how well you can do in the later levels after you've had a little bit of practice. It's challenging, but it's fun, nice to look at, and has a great soundtrack. It also has a lot of cute, silly humor, which will become a staple of the series.